Okay, let's open a word of prayer. Lord, thank you for this day. We pray you'll bless our time together, and that what we talk about today might be edifying and informative. Bless us today in Jesus' name, amen. Well, today I'm going to talk about, I got this title from an old Walter Russell Mead article in Tablet magazine called Not Destined to Live in Quiet Times. Does that seem like maybe that sort of nails the times that we live in? Just as a reminder, I'm not going to be here next Sunday. I'm going to be in Texas for Until He Comes Prophecy Conference in Rockwall, Texas. You can go and register for that at hopeforourtimes.com. And there's also a live stream. There is a slight charge for the live stream. But I think if you buy the live stream, you get the live stream from the conference we had in San Diego. And all the talks are going to be different. Tom Hughes and myself, and I probably should always make this disclaimer before I ever speak at prophecy conferences that just because I speak at a prophecy conference doesn't mean I agree with every position of every other speaker that's there, and they don't agree with every position that I have. So always keep that in mind. I don't know what they're going to talk about in advance, so it might be something I totally disagree with, and that's the way these conferences go sometimes. So pray for that, pray for safe travel and that type of thing as I head to Texas later this week. Hang on here, I've got to get my. I wish you would pray for my voice too. I'm still having a bit of a coughing issue. Whenever I get a sinus infection or anything, I always end up with sort of an extended issue with coughing, just because of the way my body seems to work. So, and I've been great all morning until I get up here to talk. So I've just went an hour and a half without coughing once. So figures. So one of the things I talk about a lot is the convergence of events. And so because of my voice, I'm probably going to try to keep this a little bit short today. But you've heard me say that before. I talk about acceleration, convergence, logistics, and understanding. And I do really think we're at this time where we're going to see these things happen more and more rapidly. And I think as we go forward, we're going to get to the place where we're going to have a little bit better understanding of some of the things that are going on. Again, I always cite this verse, Daniel chapter 12, verse 8. And I heard, but I understood not. Then said I, O my Lord, what shall be the end of these things? And he said, Go thy way, Daniel, for the words are closed up and sealed till the time of the end. Many shall be purified and made white and tried, but the wicked shall do wickedly. None of the wicked shall understand, but the wise shall understand. And it says in Daniel chapter 11 that the wise will instruct many. And again, we live at this time where I personally think that these seals, as they open, they're tied to the birth pangs, but I think it's like normal birth pangs. Now, I've never given birth. Okay. I did pass a kidney stone once, and I remember that day. It's been 40 years ago, probably. It was 40 years ago. And it got worse and worse. And then I gave birth to the kidney stone, and it was over. And that's sort of how this is going to be in the end times, that the birth pangs are going to get closer and closer together, and I think we're really at that time. So let me get up here I'll try not to cover some of the things I covered last week. I want you to understand that we're living at this time where we're going to see some interesting things. For right now, this development of AI and the financial issues that come with it. I read an article this week, and I don't really remember where, that AI is having some issues. Their business model doesn't seem to be working that well. They're losing hundreds of millions of dollars. To operate these AI systems, it costs a lot of money for electricity and computing power. There's also an issue with getting the chips that are necessary. You should know this, I think, plays into the Abraham Accords and some other things that the United Arab Emirates and Saudi Arabia are buying up everything they can get their hands on in terms of AI. I think this is very interesting, particularly when you look at some of the things, and I'll talk about it later, that Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman wants to do with regard to his city, Neom, the line, and the relationship between Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates. The Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia is very ambitious. So, but this is another issue that's coming up, is that the authors whose pirated books are powering generative AI are claiming what they did was they took about 200,000 books and they put them into this large language model with a lot of other information that they gleaned from the internet. And now they hope to make money from it, but all the people who, hey, I wrote a book, and you're generating something from it and you're making money from it and you're not paying me? Well, that doesn't seem fair. Of course, they're not making really any money from it. It's costing them a lot of money right now. But I think where you're going to see most of the development of AI is on the medical and defense side. Nobody's slowing down. That is a pipe dream. I hear talks about, oh, well, we just need to put brakes in and put little switches in that will keep them from going too far. But what if China's going too far? Do you think that the United States is going to slow down? So I think that this is an arms race that we're in. I think it has all kinds of end times Bible prophecy related things to it. It's got an apocalyptic aspect to it. I'm still trying to decide what I'm going to talk about in Texas. I may talk about that. But there's plenty of things to talk about. It's just getting them coalesced. Now, this is an issue I think that's going to become more and more prevalent. We're going to see more and more persecution of Christians as we get closer to the end. I think that this is inevitable. I don't think there's any way that this is going to be rolled back. For example, here is a organization in, this comes out of True North. Christian Ministry is suing a Quebec government. What the Christian Ministry did was they had rented a public building from the government. And the government found out that they are pro-life and they were going to espouse pro-life views of that. And so the government came in and shut them down, even though the Canadian Bill of Rights allows them. I don't think the Canadian Bill of Rights protection is as strong as what we supposedly have here in the United States, used to have here in the United States, but they're just shutting them down. And so if you want to do it, you can go ahead and sue us and spend thousands on legal fees and hope that maybe a judge will award you your attorney's fees. Now, we've seen this in the United States with some of the shutdowns over the past few years. Some churches like the Grace Community Church in the Los Angeles area, Sun Valley, California, pastored by John MacArthur, did sue the city of Los Angeles, and they were able to recover a substantial amount of legal fees. But censorship is going to be the norm. This is an article from the Sociable. It's a website that I would highly recommend that you peruse every now and then. The people that run that website, that blog, they do a pretty good job of coalescing some of the issues related to technology, artificial intelligence, Great Reset, those sort of things. And here's what they say. We own the science remix. YouTube has provided health guidance bans health guidance not approved by the WHO and local authorities. And here is their misinformation policy. Michael Schellenberger wrote this in his Twitter account. YouTube's new policy is that it will censor you if you disagree with the World Health Organization. And this is concerning. So it may very well be that our videos are going to be removed at some point from YouTube. And you just need to understand that YouTube really, while it claims to be a social media platform, it is engaged in pretty strong censorship. We've had strikes against our account. We've been able to get most of those removed on appeal. We have one that they didn't remove. We had something that they gave us a strike for. We appealed it. and they took away the strike, and then we had a duplicate video of that put up, and they gave us a strike on that, and wrote to them and said, well, you just removed the strike for the same thing. And they said, we don't care. It's our platform. And so that we have this little warning strike that's been out there for now, and that never disappears. And that strike never goes away. Other strikes expire after a couple of weeks, but that initial strike, when they give you that first gotcha, that stays forever. But Schellenberger and some of the other guys, Matt Taibbi, who had did a lot of the work on the government censorship files coming out of the Charlie Vector 019er situation, testified in front of Congress, wrote extensively about this on his blog, as did Schellenberger. And they came up with this thing called the censorship industrial complex. And what it does is it tells you who all is involved. So here's another one from Schellenberger. There is this plan to censor everything. I saw a video of a young lady in China. She was out trying to go shopping, but her phone would not let her. It was blocking. She had to get entrance to the place, or had to show that she had approval on her phone, and wouldn't give it to her, so she couldn't buy anything. And she's walking around like, I can't buy anything. And this is troubling. I think I told you when I was in Scotland, I went to pay for something, and it said, you need approval. I was paying with a credit card. And so the store person came over, but as he was approving me, boom, all of a sudden it takes the checkout thing there at the self-checkout in this big store up in the far north this is pretty far up north in Scotland. You would consider it rural, but they did have a big store there. It wasn't a very big town, but took my picture. I forgot something in the store. I had to go back. I went through the checkout line again. As I walked up, my picture popped up on the checkout screen. So I'm in the database over there in Scotland. And at this point, I think with what we do here and putting everything online, it's pretty sure that if they want to find me, they can do this. So this global censorship complex, global censorship industrial complex, this is a great, if you can get this online, it will show you some of the things. For example, it shows you the various government agencies, U.S. Department of State, National Science Foundation, Department of Defense, Homeland Security, NATO, with CISA, and other government organizations are doing this. Then there's also for-profit organizations. I've talked about this one at the top a number of times. It's been a while. Moonshot CVE. If you remember when the administration changed, the FBI came out with a tweet. I think this has been 2 years ago now. And it took the 9/11, the Islamic extremist publication that they came out that had certain images in it. They took those images and they said, well, these are now applied to violent extremists from the United States. And all of that stuff was ported over to domestic extremists. And one of the companies that did this in Canada and elsewhere was, I think they're based in the UK, Moonshot CVE. So you ought to look those up if you want to understand them. Disinfo Cloud, New Knowledge, Graphica. These are for-profit companies. There are also academic initiatives that are going after you, like, for example, the Information Futures Lab at Brown University, Annenberg Public Policy Center, Duke Reporters Lab. And so what they'll do is, and you see this all the time. I'm sure if you post something on social media that's a little bit controversial, you'll immediately see this thing pop up that says, fact check. And so there's think tanks that also do this. I think the Aspen Forum is one of these. Yeah, Aspen Institute, Atlantic Council. They're all involved in what you could call censorship. Then there are fact checkers, and here are some of the fact checkers. I've heard if you block them in your Facebook account, but I've never figured out how to do that. And honestly, I've sort of stopped posting things that much on Facebook. Facebook is now sort of, if you post a news article, they're shadow banning it almost. In Canada, they're blocking the news sites altogether. So people in Canada who used to get a lot of information from Facebook or social media, Canada's blocking it now because Canada put in a statute that said, well, you have to pay the content creators if you're going to repost it. Facebook and Twitter, or X it's called now, would have to pay the content creator for people sharing that article on their platform. So in Canada, to get around that, and I think the EU is headed this way, they just said, okay, we're just not going to allow anybody to post any news articles. And that's how a lot of us have sort of got around the propaganda machines known as the mainstream media by relying on social media feeds. So really, I think you're going to find there's going to be very few channels that are going to allow you to do that. I think Getter here in the United States, I don't know if it has an international presence. Telegram, I think, is protected right now. I don't even know where Telegram is based. I don't even know who's behind it, but it seems to be a pretty good platform. So I'll probably be posting more on that platform. You can find me on there. I think it's John Haller 54. I don't post that much. I usually post links to, YouTube videos that we've done or interviews that I've done. These are NGOs that are involved in these things. Media Matters, Advanced Democracy. And then one more is Big Tech. They're all involved in regulating the content that you can see. And then various foundations as well. Some of these funded by pretty wealthy people. They have been involved in it too. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the indictments because I think that it relates to this control and censorship of information. I'll talk about that in a moment. The first thing I probably have to talk about this, I did a interview with Tony this week on Minute from the Midnight, and we spent about 45 minutes talking about this thing in Maui. I have watched a lot of videos. I've read a lot of articles. I've seen a lot of interviews. I've read interviews with people. Now, by the way, I'll be honest with you. I think the New York Times and some other large news organizations have done a pretty good job of interviewing people and trying to figure out. For example, this graphic on the left is from the New York Times, and it shows the structures that were destroyed in Lahaina. In fact, I'll have a little bit better picture of it in just a moment. It's been just an absolute crazy. I mean, the devastation there. Now you see concrete buildings standing. It's not unusual that concrete buildings would stand. It's not unusual, I don't think, that trees would still be standing. I've researched this. In a fast-moving fire, trees sometimes they get scorched, but they may not die. And sometimes in these things, weird things happen. I told somebody yesterday I was in Chicago once with a client, and we were getting ready to go down Lakeshore Drive. And we looked down Lakeshore Drive. We were up in the North Michigan Avenue area. And we looked down Lakeshore Drive, and here comes a funnel cloud up Lakeshore Drive, right along the edge of the lake, right up Lakeshore Drive. So we got under an underpass and waited till it went overhead. Then we drove down Lakeshore Drive to the airport. I was flying out of Midway that day. And as we drove down towards Buckingham Fountain and some of the Soldier Field and that type of thing there along the lake, what we found was the trees had been, these giant oak trees, I mean really big oak trees, had been torn out of the ground and laid on their side. But I would say 95% of the leaves were still on the trees. And it was sort of like, how did that happen? People said, well, how did they have winds from the hurricane but no rain from the hurricane when this happened? But do you remember there was a hurricane remnant? We got it. It came up north. We had like 70, 80, 90 mile per hour winds for like 7 hours one day. It was a Sunday. I remember the next day I had to drive down south. As you go down 23 there by Circleville, all those cornfields, all the corn was flattened in those fields. It was, but we didn't have any rain that day. I know because I went out to the driving range for a minute to see, because the driving range I went had the wind at my back, and I thought, well, how far will it go if I have a 80 mile an hour wind at my back? And but then there were limbs falling, and it wasn't really safe to be out there. But this was an incredible amount of damage that occurred. I mean, look at this stuff. Virtually everything is gone. There are some places there. Now you're going to see some pictures. I'll show you a picture in a minute of a house that's still standing. But a lot of the structures, I've been to Lahaina a number of times. It's been a long, long time, but look at this. I mean, it's just devastation. But concrete structures are there, and every now and then you'll see something, but usually those things have a metal roof, and they're not gone. So it's, and so you can get all of this footage. So here's the area of damage, and it was a very interesting thing. So what happened in the morning, about 6 a.m. in the morning, there was a warning that was given, hey, we got a fire, you may need to evacuate. And I don't know if they sounded the alarm. There was a lot of criticism. They didn't sound the alarm in the afternoon. I've heard some people say, well, there was an alarm that sounded in the morning. They had a brush fire. It was up here to the right. You see up there on the right, it says 6:37 a.m., a brush fire reported. And then about 9:30, 10 o'clock, they said, hey, this thing is all contained. But when that brush fire was erupting, and they had very strong winds, 70, 80, 90 miles an hour, they sent all the kids home from school. I think it was the first day of school. This is on August the 8th, so what, 12 days ago now. It seems like this thing has just happened the other day, but it's just such incredible devastation. So everybody went home, and then about 3:30, it popped back up. It jumped the highway. There's a bypass around Lahaina, and it went down into town, and then it just tore through town. Now, but what you'll see is down here to the south of the red line, right at the bottom of the picture, and north of the red lines at the top, those areas were virtually untouched. You can see a little bit of that in the photograph. You see the green area along the coast to the south, and then you see a little bit of the Kanapali golf course up there at the top. Those were all okay. And some of these are very expensive condos and mansions. They were untouched. Now, they have their newer construction. A lot of the places in Lahaina were pretty old. Old wood is very dry, and when it gets into a very hot, fast-moving fire, it literally almost explodes. And that's what happened here. And it even embers, I'm told, not sure I see how it all happened, hit boats in the harbor. And those boats caught on fire. And you can see videos of that. So you can kind of see the area to the south and the area to the north of this is protected. But look at these before and after pictures. These are satellite pictures from 2022. This is South Lahaina. And this is what it looks like. And on the right is what it looks like today. And it's just almost everything is gone. There's a few things left standing. And this happens. I mean, I did a lot of investigation of fires and explosions, and there was always something like, this doesn't make any sense. How is that thing still standing? And it happens. And sometimes it's the way the structure burns or anything. So here's another one. I think they're still stuck on a death toll of 111. I'm hearing a lot of things from people in Hawaii, and I have not been able to. There's a lot of information floating around. But locally, the people are saying that there's at least 480 bodies. They've now gone through about 25 to 40% of the burn area. People are wondering why it's taking so long. I heard an interview with Tulsi Gabbard, who was there. to look at things. She said they brought in cadaver dogs. Well, you don't bring in a cadaver dog. There's not a lot of cadaver dogs. They're fairly rare in the United States. And you bring them in, and they can only work for like 20 minutes, and then they have to be given at least a 20-minute rest period. And so it takes a long time. If this was intentional or negligent homicide that happened here, and there's, people can make the case for that, I'm sort of open to how this goes. I think there's a lot of speculation out there that I don't think is very well found. I heard somebody talking the other day. They said, we just heard there's a wildfire over on Oahu. Well, it's 100 miles away. But then the person said, how did the fire jump that far? And so people, you got to think rationally about this. This was an incredible thing. These are reefers, refrigerated semi-trailers, putting bodies in. They say there's 480. You can see them carrying a body in that's there. And a lot of times there's nothing left of the bodies. They've not necessarily been turned to ash, but they're charred remains. Lady, she had sort of an adoptive son. Mother had some problems. They took care of him. They were like grandparents' age, but he was 14. He was home from school, and they found him in his room, dead. And there's fears that there's hundreds of dead. They've had people washing up on shores. I've heard stories that they're even washing up on the shores of Lanai, the next island over. There are a lot of people still missing there. I think 1,300 people still missing as of this morning. So people got to get registered, but you need to understand the entire infrastructure of this place is destroyed. It's like a tornado goes through. It takes a while to sift through the wreckage. This is an entire town that's gone. And this is kind of the narrative that you're going to see coming up. I talked a little bit about this week. This is from the New York Times. So you always got to get the narrative in there, right? As sobering fact of Hawaii fires, planet warms, no place is safe. So we got to do something now. Listen, there's a lot of good, solid information out there that there was smart cities. They wanted to make the whole island of Maui a smart island. They have a conference coming up in September. I don't know if it'll take place. And they're kind of trying to figure out, we need the tourist dollars to support the people on the island. And a lot of people in Lahaina probably worked in the tourism industry at the resorts in Kapalua, Kanapali, and down in Kihei, Wailea. There's a lot of wealthy people that live there. And again, folks, I'm all for facts. So I hear people say, well, Oprah's home didn't burn, and Jeff Bezos' home didn't burn. Well, Jeff Bezos' home is an hour away from where the fire was. So I would kind of expect that it didn't burn. Oprah's home is up country, but up country they had a fire, and I've heard that fire destroyed, and that was part of the problem. Was up country, 20-30 minute drive up the mountain, was a fire, and it destroyed hundreds of structures. Don't think it had any fatalities, but it's not as densely populated as Lahaina is. And Lahaina, it's house, condo, apartments, that type of thing. So you're going to see that. So you're going to see anomalies. So here's this. Everybody says, look, this proves that somebody did something, and this house did survive. I mean, look at it. But it's concrete, and it's got a metal roof, and it's fairly new. And so newer homes seem to do better. Or refurbished homes. There's a shopping mall in the north part of Lahaina, and I think it has a metal roof, and it's concrete, and it's there. Everything's closed because the infrastructure is destroyed to keep the refrigeration going. So I don't think that some of this is unusual. That's just my opinion. There are plenty of other theories out there that, the elites destroyed it because they want to make this a smart city. Again, you're going to see this narrative. This was a week or two ago in the Evening Standard in the UK, who will stop Earth burning? And all these people are responsible for everything that's going on because they're changing the weather. But Hawaii and it takes time to get the stuff in there. So there's a lot of things. FEMA didn't do anything. Red Cross didn't do anything. But I heard a lot of interviews yesterday with people, local people, and they're saying, yeah, everybody's here, everybody's set up, and things are getting out there. But there was this period of time where you got to get the stuff marshaled together. And we can argue about whether the response was adequate or not. They didn't sound the siren in the afternoon. That's clear. The guy said, didn't sound the alarm. There's a siren for tsunami warnings. And he said, well, I was afraid people would run up the mountain into the fire. Okay, he's resigned. He's gone. And I think that was probably pretty irresponsible because the Hawaii regulations that I saw a picture of, they say, hey, these sirens are used for tsunamis, wildfires. It's right there in their emergency management documents. And maybe the guy never read them. But there's also a possibility that when this thing happened, there was no place to go. As people tried to leave town, they were turned around. The police have said we turned them around because power lines were down, trees were down, they couldn't get through. And there's not much, there's one way in, essentially one way in and one way out. And a lot of them were blocked. And so the people were jumping into the ocean, but a lot of people died in the ocean because the smoke was so dense, it came right down to the surface of the water and they couldn't breathe and they suffocated. It's a tragedy of, I guess I would say, biblical proportions. I think it's a preview of coming attractions. I think as we look at some of the prophecies of Revelation and elsewhere, there is prophesied in extreme heat. And I really think that the sun is in a very active cycle. I mean, we've had hot before. We were in Southern California a few weeks ago, 2 weeks ago, recently, 3 weeks ago, and it was hot. It was really hot. But I've been in Southern California when it was 10 degrees hotter than that. I've been in Phoenix when it's 118. But it does seem like right now something is going on because these things are happening. For example, here's some headlines. This is from Canada. This is British Columbia. They've evacuated towns. They've also up in the Northwest Territories, mass evacuations, biggest rescue operation in territory's history. This is from Friday or Saturday's National Post in Canada, and it's going to change the area. I mean, this is a time when we're going to be seeing these things. We're seeing weird things in nature. There's a lot of drought around. There's a lot of people not having good crops this year. And this is a lot of places in the world. India shut down exports of rice. They're the biggest rice exporter in the world. Well, if you're getting 70% of your rice, which is a main staple in your diet in certain countries, from India, where are you going to go get it? How are you going to afford it if you're a poor country? And so we're going to see, I think, as we go forward into the fall, we're going to see some rather severe food shortages, and it probably will impact us here too, I think. I don't know. I'm not a prophet. I'm just looking at, I would say the tea leaves, but then that sounds like I'm into the occult. But I'm sort of just looking at the facts there. There's a lot of things going on. Here's another thing. A new hornet in Georgia poses threat to the ecosystem because this hornet goes after honeybees. And I've heard reports there's people in certain parts of the country having trouble getting honey. Now, I was at the store recently. There's honey all over the place. So it's going to be hit or miss. And it may be that there's honey there today and it's gone tomorrow. So support your local farmers, and I think you need to stock up. And as I mentioned, the news ban in Canada, as the wildfire spread, Canadian leaders asked Meta to reverse its news ban. Listen, Meta, Facebook only did the news ban because you guys put in a law that made them do it. So now they'll go act like, oh, well, look how bad you people are for not sharing. Listen, the governments need to take some responsibility for this. Here's an article. What if democracy and climate mitigation are incompatible? maybe we need to put in a lot of controls on people. And we see this through social media. They're going to net zero. This is a good commentary from the National Post in Canada the other day. Net zero could prove to be one of Canada's priciest policy blunders. Why is that? Well, go listen to Dave Walsh Energy on Getter. He puts up some of his interviews and some of his writing. Personally, I think if there's a change in administration, he probably should be the energy secretary, because he's the guy who will talk to you about baseload capacity. You need to have a baseload capacity. If you don't have a baseload capacity, you're not going to be able to have an electricity grid. So what you see, like in Maui, there's been this big push. We want to move to 100% renewables. You won't want to live there. I'm sorry, because solar and wind don't operate at night. They have a lot of wind in the Hawaiian Islands. Sure, that's great, but it's not on all the time. You need to have a baseload power. And with restrictions on uranium and that type of thing, with some of the conflicts in Africa, which involves some of the major, like Niger's one of the, I think it supplies close to 10% of the world's uranium. And the new junta coming in, they don't like the French colonialism that sort of governed the country for a long time, so they won't sell any uranium to France, which is one of the last countries that relies for nuclear power and for a lot of its power, electricity. And so in Canada, they're trying to go to net zero. We're going to make every car electric. Good luck with that, because what are you doing? You're increasing the demand on the power grid. And everybody's going to go home and plug in at night when the power grid is essentially down or depleted. They're not going to be able to charge their cars so they can go to work the next day. That's okay. We'll let them work from home. You're going to see a major, I think, what's coming is a major collapse in commercial real estate. It's already hitting. San Francisco is sort of the bellwether for all of this stuff that's happening. Properties that appraised at $250 million, big office buildings, skyscrapers, they were declared to be worth $250 million. They're now selling for 1/8 to 1/4 of what they were appraised at just 2 years ago, because nobody's coming down to work. There's a guy who does these videos. If you can find them, I would recommend you look at them. I don't even know the guy's name. Just look up Market Street in San Francisco, empty stores on YouTube, and you should be able to find it. He walked down Market Street, which is like one of the major main, if not the main, commercial thoroughfare in San Francisco. I would say 95% of all the storefronts all the way down Market Street are empty, closed. You might have a coffee shop here and there. You might have a small sandwich shop or something like that, but otherwise everything is gone. Westfield had a big mall there. San Francisco Center Mall or City Center Mall. And they just said, hey, here's the keys. See you later. Nordstrom's is closed there. And why not? I mean, with the flash mobs that you see. So that's a problem. Now there's in Los Angeles, Southern California, they're supposed to be having a big storm, which is pretty unusual, fairly rare. So they're expecting, there's a lot of warnings, flash floods and that type of thing. And then here's an article on the front page of the Los Angeles Times yesterday about that house that I told you about. Why is that house still standing? And I think there's a reason for that. Even other places, Spain, Tenerife and the Canary Islands, a lot of fires going on there as well. Here is an article in the Le Figaro in France talking about a heat dome in southern France, and they've had some fires there. I think I heard that there was a resort that burned the other day. So I just think we're going to see more of this. Okay, so let's talk about Israel. So let's set the stage. So I talked a little bit about this last week. There's a lot of concern about war in the north. The concern has been heightened because some reservists in the Israeli Air Force have not been showing up for their reserve duty because they don't like what's going on with judicial reform. This is causing concern about readiness. Defense Minister Gallant came out last week and said, well, listen, if Hezbollah, if you're thinking about doing anything, or Iran, you're thinking about doing anything in Syria, pretty much focused on southern Lebanon, they'll say, listen, we will bomb you back to the Stone Age. Well, Nasrallah didn't respond too kindly to that. Earlier this week, Monday or Tuesday, he gave a speech, and he always gives these speeches. He's in a bunker. You hardly ever see him in a group of people. If it is a group of people, it's maybe 10 people. You'll see big crowds listening to a TV screen of him. I guess he works remotely, for lack of a better term. He's in a bunker all the time. And so here's a video of him. Just listen to some of the quotes of what he said in this speech. There's no sound on the video, by the way, guys. Today I can present evidence when I say to the enemy, you too will be sent back to the Stone Age. So you say you're going to send us to the Stone Age, we're sending you to the Stone Age. If you go to war with Lebanon, you too will return to the Stone Age. Some people might say that I'm exaggerating, so let me provide some evidence. Israeli War Minister Gallant is a former general. He is surrounded by generals and can sit down with them. The size of occupied Palestine is unknown. Once I prepared a map and showed it on my hand like that, we can prepare a list. We have such a list. If he doesn't have one, we can send one to him. The civilian airports, the military airports, the Air Force bases, the power plants and electricity distribution grid, the water plants, the main communication centers, various infrastructures. There is no need to go into detail. The oil, petrol, and ammonium nitrate plants, they've made a lot of direct threats against the big ammonium nitrate plant in Haifa, along the harbor there. You can also add the Dimona nuclear plant. All of these are located in a small territory. We are not talking about a country the size of Russia, the U.S., or even Sudan. We are talking about occupied Palestine. So they're going to, so he's threatening that they're going to go after that. Now, at the same time that this is going on, this is partly, I think, hype in some respects. There are talks underway. Our government's trying to do, engaged in those talks, where they're saying, listen, we want to have some kind of a peace deal between Israel and Saudi Arabia. We want to have a normalization agreement, bring them into the Abraham Accords. Part of that, and it appears that Mohammed bin Salman wants to do this. He would like this. He would like to kind of have the U.S. as part of this. The U.S. part of this would be to provide some defense guarantees to Saudi Arabia and also allow Saudi Arabia to start its own civilian nuclear energy program. So that's all kind of on the table. And there was a video, I don't know if it was on Newsmax, the guy says, they're going to have this peace agreement any day now. Well, I don't think it's going to be any day. There's still a lot to be worked out. Ron Dermer who's former ambassador to the U.S. and probably one of the main foreign policy advisors to Benjamin Netanyahu, was in the U.S. recently for some meetings at the White House or State Department. And he said, listen, I don't dismiss the fact that Israel might actually throw some support towards a civilian nuclear energy program in Saudi Arabia. Yair Lapid, on the left, though, he came out and said, no way. No way should we allow this to happen, which is kind of an interesting conflict that's been set up. So the top U.S. General, Milley, is supposed to be in Israel this week for talks. They were supposed to go in June, but then they had the I think, the fake coup of the Wagner forces in Russia, so he stayed home. But he's going to be there this week to talk about, listen, we're concerned that Israel can't defend itself. You have these people not showing up for reserve duty. Is Israel really on board with the defense? We send a lot of money to Israel. Some in Israel think we don't need the money anymore. Some in the United States says we should stop sending them money. And it comes with strings. That's part of the reason that the people in Israel don't want it. And it's interesting, though, that a lot of forward deployed ammunition and artillery that the United States had for use in the Middle East was stored in Israel, but then got shipped to Ukraine. So Milley has a lot of gall coming to Israel and saying, hey, you guys are you guys able to defend yourselves? Well, we were with some of the stuff that you had here. Now we've got to replace it. They need new fuel tankers, but they're not going to get those for another 3, 4, or 5 years. At the same time, this is going on. Iran and Saudi Arabia foreign ministers are meeting. The Iranian foreign minister went to Saudi Arabia, and they're sort of normalizing things. And Saudi Arabia is doing this because they have a concern with Iran, and they don't see a lot of support for the United States. So they're trying to get this on the other hand. They're trying to get this thing resolved. Now, Caroline Glick on our program interviewed, I want to say his name is Richard Goldberg. He had worked in the Trump administration. He's incredibly well-versed on Iran. So I just want you to listen to a couple minutes of what he says about. So remember the deal? We gave Iran $6 billion. At least that's what the press told us. They gave us we gave them $6 billion, but they can only spend it on civilian stuff. Well, the $6 billion they were going to spend on civilian stuff, now they can spend on other things. They're just going to shift it from one pocket to the other. And it's a total complete fiction on the part of our administration to say this. And I think you'll hear that Mr. Goldberg says it's not $6 billion, it's even more.
I don't remember his name, but whatever, the spokesman or the ostensible spokesman for the Iranian negotiating team made a statement where he said, there are absolutely no restrictions on our use of these funds, and we won't accept any restrictions on the use of these funds. So the Iranians are already saying, for what it's worth, that the Biden administration officials, Blinken, Jake Sullivan, and others are simply lying when they're presenting the deal on these hostages as something that isn't going to be used to finance continued terrorism by the Iranian regime.
Well, I would say they're both misleading, because what the Iranians are trying to spin and what the administration is not admitting is that the money will be quite flexible in its use. This pot of money cannot go to terrorism, right? Okay, what a great win. Okay, yeah, obviously this $6 billion to go to terrorism. It frees up a different $6 billion to go to terrorism, which is where the duplicity is. But in this situation, what can the money be used on? Not just food and medicine, which is what the White House is saying. It can also be used for any other purpose that is somehow non-illicit in nature by itself, but is allowing Iran access to cash to free themselves of the burdens of their debts. We're talking about dues to the United Nations, dues to conferences, debts that they owe to foreign nations, all kinds of things that we've already seen being paid out of money in Iraq, which we should talk about, because this is the second tranche of money that we're making available. But we've already seen the track record of money being made available to Iran in Iraq, and that's how we know what this money will be used for.
So what do we know about that? Tell us about that.
Okay, so this is a hostage deal. It's a ransom. It's the largest ransom in U.S. history. It has a bunch of implications, like I talked about, for both Iranian hostage-taking, Russian, Chinese hostage-taking in the future, etc. But it's also part of a nuclear deal that is already underway, one that was negotiated in secret, without notifying Congress, without giving Congress a vote, as it's required to do so under a law that was passed in 2015. And they're doing it methodically in ways to ostensibly claim there is no deal and all this money isn't tied to a deal. This is $6 billion. Several weeks ago, we learned through press reports that the U.S. had made available $10 billion and then allowed Iraq to move that $10 billion that was stuck in Baghdad to Oman, a bank account in Oman, under the exact same type of rules and restrictions that we're seeing now play out for the Qatari bank account where the South Korean money will go. So we're at $16 billion that we know of that has now been made
This was
accessible
reported
to Iran.
how long ago? This was
In
reported when?
June and July, we started seeing reports of first a $2.76 billion release of funds that was used to pay off a bunch of Iranian debts. Then the Iraqis came forward and said, actually, we now have given Iran access to all $10 billion that we have here. Then the Iraqis and Iranians announced a new oil for gas swap that is not allowable under U.S. sanctions, can only happen if the Treasury Department has authorized it. And then finally, a new waiver came out in just the last few weeks where the State Department announced they had given Iraq clearance to move all of Iran's money and all future payments to Iran, by the way, because Iraq imports Iranian electricity and natural gas and pays for it on an ongoing basis. That money had been going into escrow in Baghdad under our rules. That money now goes to a bank account in Oman for Iran's use. So
I don't understand
we're at $16 billion
why is
and
Iraq
more.
And so why is Iraq doing this? Because Iraq is effectively under control because of the large Shiite population. They have a lot of control by Iran. So this has an impact on this agreement that they're talking about with Saudi Arabia. By the way, I saw Biden at Camp David with the South Korean and Japanese prime ministers the other day. It's unbelievable. He does not know where he is. And now there's some things coming out in the investigation that he was using an assumed name. What was the name of the Richard Price? I don't know. In communications with his son about Chinese stuff. So the Congress is investigating this. Here's a little bit of Prime Minister Netanyahu on Bloomberg television talking about a potential Saudi Arabian deal. This is one of the things that he really wants.
In discrete negotiations?
I don't know. You tell me. What's being
the
said?
answer is a lot less than you think.
Okay, so if you look at, for example, giving the Palestinians their own state, is that something that you would, is that a red line?
It won't be their own state. It'll be an Iranian-controlled state that will, in an area that is about the width of the Washington Beltway. If you take Israel and the Palestinian areas in Judea, Samaria, and the West Bank together, it's a little more than the width of the Washington Beltway. You put a Palestinian state, which will be controlled by Iran, in half of that, or in the middle of that, you won't have a Palestinian state. You'll have an Iranian terror state. And
So that's a no.
Of course, it's a no. Yes.
So under no circumstances would you allow that?
No, what I said often is that the way that I would have a solution is two things about that. One, that the Palestinians should have all the powers to govern themselves and none of the powers to threaten Israel. This means that in whatever final settlement, peace settlement we have with the Palestinians, Israel remains I would say Israel has the overriding security power in the entire area, ours and theirs. Otherwise, we collapse. They collapse.
Prime Minister, you're going to UNGA in New York, I believe,
Yes, yes.
second week or third week of September.
Yes,
Will you
yes.
meet with Donald Trump?
I don't know. No, but
Have you
you're the
spoken to him on the phone?
You're the first to have suggested it. No, I haven't.
Are you expecting an invitation to the White House from President Biden?
Well, he said that we are going to meet, so I'll leave it up to him.
What are you most excited for going to UNGA?
Well, I've been there many years.
I know, many times.
What am I most excited about? The possibility of broadening the already historic Abraham Accords. I think this will change history. I think it will not only end the Arab-Israeli conflict, not the Palestinian-Israeli conflict, but our conflict with 98% of the Arab world. It will also, I think, create a new peace between the Jewish state and the Muslim world.
But Prime Minister, the countries of the Abraham Accord, some of them have been frustrated, right, about some of the noise that's been coming out of your government. Will you meet with them to try and reassure them?
Well, we meet with them all the time, and we reassure them all the time. But I think some of them are habituated to the fact that noise is noise. And I think that's true of the markets too. There's a lot of noise in the market. But if you look at the fundamentals of Israel, if you look at the growth rate, which is double the United States, expected now. You look at the deficit, which is 1.5 at most percent compared to 5.5% in the US. If you look at the debt to GDP, which is 60%, which is less than 100% in the US, and you know what it's like in the EU. And if you look at the investments, I mean, NVIDIA builds here the supercomputer. Intel just puts $25 billion for a
These
chip
are
plant.
prospects longer term, but you're right.
That's my point. That there's noise in the short-term markets.
Yeah.
There's clarity in the long-term markets.
So that's that. And look, Mohammed bin Salman is pretty ambitious. We have this, situation. We have all the Iranian influence that's going on. You also have Russia and Turkey and Syria on Israel's northern border. Iran's developing missiles. You have, but Mohammed bin Salman is, he's got this vision to build the line, this smart city about 100 miles long through the desert, down along the Red Sea. And here's, I've showed pictures like this before. That's 1,500 feet tall with a city in between. He wants to do this. This is a picture of some recent progress. The reports that I've seen say that 20% of this is the infrastructure, that 20% of this project is completed. Now it's infrastructure, foundation work, and that type of thing, clearing the land. This is the largest city building project in probably human history. So this is very ambitious. They're trying to protect the price of oil. Here's a little documentary from, I think, a UK television about this, about the line and some of the things. This is just within the last month.
In one of the most anticipated and intriguing projects in the history of city building, an ambitious plan for a megacity in the Saudi desert has the world wondering if this is really a blueprint for the future. The Line, the biggest infrastructure project in history, promises a revolution in urban living. But what is it? Who's making it? And can it actually work?
Listen to his English, the Crown Prince. He's interviewed in this. And so you see, this is the project. As I said, reports are it's about 20. This is sort of some satellite drone images. They say it's 20% complete. I have no way of knowing. It's a long-term project. It's not going to be done, but you'll hear the Crown Prince in a moment say that this is part of our 2030 vision. Everybody's using that 2030 date for all
Create
kinds of
the
things.
new civilization for tomorrow, and we need to encourage other nations to keep doing the same things for a better planet.
Maybe we should have some new urban ideas and rethink how people are going to live. And that's what takes you to this, just asking that question.
The question is, how can we create something that's better? And that is what both fascinates me and scares the hell out of me.
And so this is what the interior looks like. And it has kind of this Hanging Gardens of Babylon feel to it. It's kind of
When we are
creepy.
bringing all the piece of puzzle together, I don't know what's the outcome of it. That's gonna be the creativity of the people gonna live from the whole globe in New York. I can promise you that's gonna be something new and creative, but what is it? It's unknown. We're gonna see.
And so the Crown Prince, they kind of Riyadh sort of let it be known, hey, there's not going to be any deal really with Israel until after the 2024 election in the United States, assuming we have one at this point. And the Crown Prince, as I've mentioned many, many times, he has been pushing this sort of thing that's known in the press as the Hashemite Kingdom of Palestine, where Jordan would take over the Palestinian areas. But he's pushing for control of the Temple Mount. This is in JNS. By the way, JNS.org is an excellent news website now for news related to Israel. Seems to be, well, it leans conservative and right, and so that's probably why I like it. But a lot of people concerned about what's going on in Israel right now. There was some reports this week that the person from the Netanyahu coalition in charge of issuing visas is not issuing visas to some Christian organizations for their people to come to Israel. That's very concerning, and there's going to be a dust up about that and everything. So, but Mohammed bin Salman would like to get a hold of the Temple Mount. He's sort of floated that, hey, Jordan, we're going to take over the Temple Mount, and he's going to give something to Jordan in return. The Hashemite kingdom of Jordan is viewed by many people as rather weak. I believe about 75% of the population in Jordan is Palestinian. The king's wife is Palestinian. And although they used to control Mecca and Medina, and they were kicked out by the Saud family 100 years ago, they were sort of given this prize. They were actually given Iraq as a part of their kingdom, the Hashemite kingdom of Iraq and the Hashemite kingdom of Jordan, the Hashemite family. By the way, they're fairly wealthy. At least the research that I've done indicates that the Jordanian royal family may bring in from their investments each year, not what they have. They bring in like interest and profit from trading and stuff of about $1 billion a year. So don't let him play poor. There's a lot of money there. So they still have this thing with the reasonableness law. They're going to try to delay the hearing a little bit because the Supreme Court Justice, Esther Hayut, is supposed to retire in October. So they figure we might have a chance, she and another justice who would maybe vote in favor of this, vote to strike down the reasonableness law that was passed by the Knesset. They're going to be off the court in October, and they may not be able to appoint a replacement. It's very similar to how things happen in the United States with court appointments and administrations and that type of thing. So this is editorial cartoon from Haaretz showing the Supreme Court president taking care of one of the people in Netanyahu's coalition. Foreign Affairs has a pretty good article, The Case Against the Israeli-Saudi Deal. You might want to look at that. War in Ukraine, I don't have a lot of comments about that. It's not going well for the Ukrainians. I think even people high up in our administration and Congress and that type of thing are saying there's no way Ukraine's going to win this. Russia's been attacking the food infrastructure. This is going to have big implications around the world. Turkey's a little bit upset with Russia right now, which is kind of interesting because there's a ship attack in the Black Sea, and that's very important to Turkey. There is this week, in Ukraine, this is in the New York Times yesterday, dead and hurt in Ukraine war on both sides of the conflict total about 500,000 now. Now, I have no way of knowing whether this is true or not. This is what there's a lot of people have been crippled, injured. It's been a gory bloodbath. This is something that really hasn't been seen since World War I or World War II. It's a historically large conflict. So let's say the Ukrainians have lost 250,000 people. I mean, that's like, what, 4 or 5 times what we lost in Vietnam over about a 10-year period. It's like you take all American dead in all wars for a substantial period of time, it's more than the Ukrainians have lost in the last year and a half. It's pretty bad. And I just don't think Ukraine has the firepower to win. And they're provoking Russia. Russia was making a lot of statements this week through People and their Foreign Policy magazine about we're ready for this to go nuclear. That's bad for everybody. And that could happen. I can't discount that possibility. So now we have this big meeting in Durban, South Africa this week. The BRICS nations, anti-U.S. trade bloc considers gold-backed currency to the dollar. Here's a little thing from the BRICS homepage. Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. They're talking about instituting a new currency. Now, how far they're going to get with this right now, I don't know. They're going to get some traction. It's not going to be convertible to gold. It's going to be gold backed. But this is supposed to take place the 22nd through the 24th in Durban. I don't think Putin is going to show up, but he'll send a representative, I'm sure. But they're talking about this because they're trying to de-dollarize the world. And the world is in a bit of a thing. Brazil has come out. This is their new digital currency that they're rolling out now. I don't know what kind of traction they'll get with it. This is a CBDC tracker. Brazil should be green now. The countries that are green are in pilot programs. The only country that's really rolled it out is Nigeria in Africa. But there's a lot you can see there's pilot program in South Africa, India, Russia, China, all have pilot programs for central bank digital currencies. We don't want that to go there at the same time. That's happening. Fitch is warning banks here in the United States that they're subject to being downgraded, including the largest, JP Morgan Chase. That could have a big impact on financial markets. I think mortgage rates are now higher than they've been since the turn of the millennium, back around 2001. I think 2002. So in the last 20 years, these are the highest interest rates on mortgages. That's going to have an impact on the economy. China had their major property company, Evergrande, filed for bankruptcy. They've moved to bolster confidence, but everybody's looking at China right now and being in a period of deflation and a bit of decline. So nobody knows exactly what's going to happen. China is going to be a problem. So there's problems in the economy. And I had a whole bunch of things on the indictment of the president this week. And they seem to have disappeared from my... I had a whole bunch of... I had the pictures of the indictment, all the people involved. That's weird. I'm going to have a meeting with my staff when I get back to the office and what they're doing. So let me just talk about it just for a second. So I'll put it under this category while we talk. So they indicted 18 people. They referred to a couple of other people. About 6 of the indicted people are lawyers that represented Donald Trump. This is in Georgia. They're supposed to report for not sentencing, but booking, mugshots, bail, that type of thing this week. This is a shot across the bow. It appears that this indictment came out just when they were unearthing some things regarding the president's son. This has happened. This is the 4th indictment. Trump now faces 91 charges, hundreds of years in prison. And they want to put him in prison. They don't want a settlement on this. And part of what they are doing here, this is the thing that's concerning, because we talk about, I guess what I should do is I should put up the slide that I was talking about. They're trying to censor people. This is an intimidation factor. They're trying to make it so that no one will ever want to be a lawyer for President Trump or any of the other people or challenge a bad election, even though they've done it all along themselves. I mean, remember 2016? That election was stolen because of Russian influence. We went through that for years. But what's happened here is they're now weaponizing the justice system, and they're bringing criminal charges against the lawyers. And part of that is, that's a message. If you ever dare to represent somebody that we don't like, we're taking your livelihood away from you. That's the message. That's beyond the merits of what was claimed. This is a very troubling time in America. It's a troubling time in the world. And what did I title this thing today? Not destined to live in quiet times. we're going to see this. Now, listen, don't worry about it. We know how it all works out at the end, but we need to have our minds, steel our minds, steel our hearts, make sure of our walk with the Lord, stay in the Word, and pay attention to these things and understand what was going on. It is troubling to me that I see a lot of churches that really don't talk about this at all. Now, maybe we talk about it too much here. Okay, I'll accept that criticism. But I won't agree with it. I'll accept it. It's your right to criticize us. And we do it because we think it's important. We think that this is an important time that we can live. Very important time to live. So I may or may not do a update next weekend or midweek this week, since I'll be traveling some down to Texas. And late August is when you want to go to Texas. I mean, that's it's going to be warm. I think it's supposed to be 112 in Dallas earlier in the middle of the week. So we're looking forward to that. But anyway, look, pray for the conference. Pray that people will be edified by it. And if you want to sign up, go to that. And let's pray. Lord, thanks for the day. Lord, we just pray that you'll empower us with your Spirit, that we should be a people who consider ourselves blessed to live at this time. Just like the early disciples were told, you should be blessed that you live at the time of the first coming of Messiah. We should be blessed that we're living at what appears to be the time of the second coming of Messiah. Lord, just give us strength, give us courage, give us a commitment to the Word and to each other and the truth of the Word of God, that we can stand firm in our faith, and give us opportunities to share the gospel. Lord, give us sound minds so that we can kind of analyze the confusing things that come our way because of the way the media and governments are right now. Just give us the ability to discern and cut through all of that, and give us patience to figure out what's going on as we inform others. Bless us this week in Jesus' name. Amen.